Hello, everybody, and welcome to Opportunity China's graduate program update session. Thank you very much, all indeed, for joining us today. We will be running our chat function once again as usual. However, we do want, for brevity's sake and to keep things as structured as possible, to keep things running smoothly. So that's why we did ask for those of you who are in attendance today to send in their questions in advance. Many of you have done that already, which was great. Thank you very much indeed for doing so. And we're going to be able to use those to actually help bring about structure to our presentation today. So that was incredibly useful for those of you who were able to do that. Opportunity China are in the chat box today, so if any of you do have any questions at all whatsoever, please do go ahead and make sure you ask those. But today, what we are going to look to cover, for the sake of those of you who are on the Teach China graduate program, or those of you who are scheduled to be going out to China, we will be focusing on looking at the challenges that there are going to be ahead, or that you may feel you might be facing. But most importantly, we're going to be going over information about what to expect, about what the current situation is in China with relation to entry, exit, and visas. And we're also going to be talking a little bit about current relations between China and the United Kingdom and the United States, depending on where you're from. As many of you will certainly be seeing a lot of news that may potentially be concerning for you. What we're going to do today is talk a little bit more about that very openly, very honestly, and give you what our experience is, but very importantly, actually, what the experience of our teachers who are currently in China have as well. For those of you who have been unable to join, of course, this is going to be put up online. Those of you who want to watch it afterwards, that's absolutely fine as well. It's going to stay here on our YouTube channel. Okay, great. Well, let's make a start. So, what we are going to be looking at today is, first of all, our current situation in China. So China reached its peak in terms of COVID-19 around the middle of February. It began to rapidly decline from around the end of February time, and cases within China have been below 100 since early March. Now, there have been a couple of isolated clusters that many people may have seen in the news, sometimes in a somewhat dramatic sense, which turned out not be so dramatic. For instance, in one of the Beijing markets, which was fought off very rapidly, and there is a small cluster in Xinjiang province, in Xinjiang Autonomous Region at the moment as well. You may have seen there were some clusters in the northeast. Again, these were dealt with very quickly and brought under control quite quickly as well. There's a bit of a cultural difference in China in terms of looking at this virus compared to how it's looked in countries like the UK and the US, where generally, rather unwisely in some people's opinions, people will look at the virus, look at 200, 300 infections in the United States or the United Kingdom per day and think, okay, that'll do, that's fine. In China, if there are 10 or 20 infections, it's very quickly acted on. Cities are locked down at a local level in order to make sure that the country itself doesn't feel the full effect. But because of these measures, the border is still effectively closed for the majority of foreigners looking to come in, which of course is going to have a very large effect on those of you who are looking to come over. The health app within China, so the green, yellow and red Pass Go show that you're healthy signs that we spoke about in an earlier webinar are still in effect and being used throughout China. These are helping with these local lockdowns. These are helping to track and trace any infections where they might come from. Overall, at the moment in China, people are feeling quite confident but also cautious about the virus, and they do not wish yet to risk further infection by opening up the borders wholesale. There has not been a solid date that they have set yet for the borders to be reopened. And of course, many of these things are fluid and dependent on outside situations. However, there are a lot of promising signs that actually have been coming in over the last couple of months, and ones that can give you a little bit of an idea or a clue as to the direction that things are heading in at the moment. CAAC, which is the Chinese Flight Authority, has a policy that has been in place since the restriction on visas and on foreigners visiting China since the end of March. They are still restrictive on flights coming in and out of China. It has loosened a bit from their 5-1 policy, which enabled incredibly few flights to come in. And as part of that loosening, the restrictions have been lifted somewhat more on foreign airlines operating since June as well, which has enabled a few more flights to come and go. It's very much heading in a direction of cautious reopening at the moment, but there is progress being made. As I mentioned, there is no definitive date that's been given for wholesale across the board access of easing, and it will likely come in sections still, with different industries likely being given priority over others until eventually there's a wholesale easing in terms of offering of visas past that 28th of March date. Certain businesses and industries have been able to get visas for foreign workers to enter China. Some of you may have seen in the news that there have been flights that have been chartered for German business, for people working within the manufacturing industry from Germany, that there have been flights chartered for workers from South Korea, as well as Singapore and many other countries as well. There have also been visas issued for those who are high-level executives or those who are working within industries that they're particularly needed. More visas have been issued now on an ongoing basis, never have been before. So again, this shows that there is a loosening and that things are beginning to progress. Most importantly and most relevantly for those who are looking to go out to China, Keystone, a private school network within China, it is an elite school network, has become the first education company to come to terms with the Chinese government to be allowed to issue visas for foreign teachers. So this is likely going to be a little bit of a trial that they're going to use. So hopefully within the next few weeks, how well this goes with the Keystone teachers coming over might give us a little bit more of an indication as to the possibility of things opening up for foreign English teachers in a bit of a broader sense. There are also travel corridors that are opening for more wholesale coming and goings for business and work purposes between China, Singapore and South Korea. And again, this will offer us maybe a little bit of an idea of a trial to see how that goes. So it's important to keep an eye on these things over the next few weeks. In terms of entering China, CAAC flight restrictions will make travel all but impossible, even if visa and entry restrictions are lifted before October. The 14-day quarantine is likely to still be there upon arrival. However, a fast track for essential UK business visitors is currently in place, which requires a COVID test upon arrival. So this is currently just for those who are visiting on their essential visas, those very small number of visas that are being issued at the moment for those who are looking at coming to China and are allowed to come to China just for the time being. The date of entry will not be before winter 2020. This is pretty much a guarantee at the moment. The reason for this is, first of all, those flight paths and programs that are currently there. They're not going to allow for anyone realistically to be allowed to enter the country before the winter of 2020. Also, the fact that the 14-day quarantine that's still in place and the recent upsurge of second spikes means that an autumn opening is going to be incredibly unlikely, if not impossible. So we would be expecting a winter 2020 opening November, December at the very earliest. What you can still do now. So this is really important when it comes to looking at what you can still do whilst you're waiting during this process. I understand it can be very frustrating not knowing an exact date when you're going to go, not knowing when you need to do certain things like go to get your documents authenticated for your visa process. What I would say in the first instance is please do not begin your document authentication or visa process. Please do not begin that until we tell you to do it. The most important reason for that is the police check. So do not apply for your police check yet, because there is still a risk that if you apply to get your police check done now, by the time the borders in China reopen, that police check will be invalid because it will be out of date. Please do wait for us to inform you and instruct you when to begin doing that. But it certainly isn't worth doing just yet. So I would say please, please, please hold fire on your document authentication process and applying for your visas until you receive further instruction to do so. What you can certainly do is begin work and complete your TEFL qualification. Now, there's a couple of really important reasons for this, and I'll come to another one in a moment, but the first important reason for doing this is that you're going to be able to use this qualification wherever, whenever, and for however long. There is going to be no expiry date on this. It's something to get working on. It's something to put you in the right mindset for when you are going to teach in China. If you're currently working any part-time or temporary work, do look at extending that, and also do look at getting something more to keep you going if you're needing to keep busy or you're needing to continue financing things. And another great option for that as well is actually looking at online teaching for the time being. Now, once you have your degree certificate, and only when you've completed your TEFL, as Chinese online teaching organisations do require you to submit a genuine copy of your degree and TEFL qualification, you can look to sign up to one of many very popular and pretty well-paying online platforms such as Dada ABC, VIP Kid, GoGo Kid, Magic Ears, and there are many, many others. Start looking into this. Once you have your degree certificate that you can take a picture of and scan and send to them, and you've completed your TEFL certificate and you've got a PDF of that, or you can take a picture of that and scan to them, then you're pretty much going to be good to go. And this is really, really, really good practice when it comes to preparing yourself for teaching in China itself. Of course, there are platforms that are for countries other than China. Do please go ahead and go for those as well. But if you want to get an idea of what it's going to be like teaching Chinese students, this is a really good option to look at, start signing on for, and keep yourself busy as well whilst you're waiting. Another really, really important thing to start looking at is planning your goals for the year. Look at where you're going to be teaching, begin to look at what you want to achieve in your role, and start to look at where you want to go and visit in China as well. These things are going to be really, really important for looking towards the future. These things are going to be really important for keeping you excited, keeping you interested. Do some more research on your city. Make sure you shoot any questions across to us. We are going to be setting everyone up with emails for teachers who are currently in China, so you can contact them. And what we're also going to be doing is we are going to be setting up an information session, an online live session with Opportunity China teachers currently in China now, for them to tell you a little bit more about their experience, what's happening with them at the moment as well. So do look out for an email for us on that in the weeks to come. This is going to be something that's going to be really important to give you a bit of insight and answer any questions that you might have at this time as well. Now, I did receive quite a few questions with relation to the current relations between China and countries in the West, particularly from those of you from the United States and a couple from the United Kingdom. So it's important, first of all, to look at what these current strains are, that they're being very heavily reported in the media. The US-China trade war, of course, is top of the list and potentially an underlier for absolutely everything else. The Hong Kong security law has been a point of contention between China and the UK and the US, as well as the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, Huawei quite recently, and also the South China Sea. So there has been a lot of discussion, a lot of coverage in the news quite recently of these events, and a couple of you have written in feeling a little concerned about whether or not you can go to China, or whether or not there will be any issues or persecution. Of course, the best people to hear this from are teachers who are currently in China. So again, watch out for this email and for this session that we're going to set up. But I would like to raise just a couple of points with relation to these things. So these tension points are absolutely nothing new when it comes to relations between China and countries in the West. Just to give you a very brief overview of tension points that have happened in the not too distant past at all, which have been arguably considerably more dramatic and potentially more damaging than things that are happening at the moment. There's the US bombing of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade in 1999, David Cameron meeting the Dalai Lama, and the freeze in UK relations in 2012, imposition of American missile system in South Korea just a few years ago in 2017, the Senkaku Islands dispute between Japan, which involved the United States heavily in 2012, the Umbrella Movement, which was in 2014. Now, I was living in China for most of these results and most of these points of tension. And I can honestly tell you that as a teacher working in China, neither myself nor any of the other teachers that I was working with, who were not in the least part involved, responsible, or even associated with these particular things to do with my country, were treated by the 1.4 billion Chinese people in any negative sense, in any bad way whatsoever. These are points of lofty political contention, and although all of these tension points that happened made a lot of noise and a lot of waves in the media, in the same way these current ones are, they did not in the least affect person-to-person exchange, the movement of students, teachers, non-political business people between the West and China in any dramatic fashion. And actually, throughout the time of many of these events happening, the exchange of teachers going to China, the welfare of teachers within China, the quality of the packages that they were offered and the support they were offered actually improved, and the visa process itself actually improved during that time for those teachers who were qualified, which are teachers who hold a minimum bachelor's degree, either 2 years experience or a TEFL certificate or a degree in education or English language. The process actually was streamlined and made a lot easier. In a similar way, China is bringing in and adopting a new teacher policy for those who are going to be coming in. Once again, looking at ensuring that those who are not qualified, so those who do not hold the bachelor's degree, the TEFL certificate, and or that experience, are now unable to go to China to teach. And again, they're looking more closely at things like criminal records for teachers who have been there a long time and maybe given teachers a bit of a bad name over there. But it's important to add that none of these changes, in the same way as any of these tension points, whether those are these ones in the present or these ones in the past, have ever, in the past, recent or long gone, affected the upward stream and improvements in the livelihoods, living standards, and quality of life of teachers living and working in China, or the demand for teachers getting there, or the ease of attaining visas for teachers who were correctly qualified. It really is important for me to stress that. You are not your country where, as an individual, you are still going to be applying for a visa as a person, not as your country. And we have never experienced throughout any of these tension points any kind of resistance being put up for teachers being able to go there, or any kind of discrimination within the workplace, professionally, or wider, for teachers who have been living and working in China. So it's important to add to that what has not happened. So what has not happened? What have we not seen throughout any of those past tension points, or indeed through these current points of tension? We've not seen China threaten or intimate in any way that it will restrict or stop working visas for private citizens from the UK, the US, Canada, Ireland, Australia, or New Zealand. So for private citizens who are working within fields such as education, within business fields, and many other economic fields, there's been no threat or intimation that visas will be stopped or prevented for those who will be applying for that Z working visa from those countries. China has not expelled, punished, or detained those in China during the COVID-19 crisis or throughout the period of political strain between China and the US in particular, and arguably the West, who are working in the capacity of private citizens. This includes hundreds of Opportunity China teachers who are currently working there now and who will be able to share their experience on the ground and answer any questions that you might have too. China's also not banned marriages or other official registrations for foreigners within the country. There's been comparatively very little anti-foreign attacks, and when I say attacks, that means words or rhetoric, let alone anything like physical attacks within China, particularly in comparison to the anti-Chinese xenophobic attitudes that we have seen on the rise within the West in countries like the UK and the US. This has simply not been replicated in China in any sort of significant way, in any way that anyone's needed to worry about. We've been keeping up to date with all of our teachers and any concerns that they have had, and things have been very positive. But again, we'll make sure you have the opportunity to speak with them and to ask any questions that you might have of them. Although there has been a little fear of foreigners bringing back COVID-19 within China around March and April, this has largely subsided. A lot of this has been due to, of course, first of all, the restrictions on foreigners entering, so there's not too many coming and going, but also a lot of campaigns that have actually been instituted by the government to ensure and educate people in China that foreigners who are living there have been there since before the COVID-19 outbreak became very large outside of China, and for them not to be worried, not to be afraid. Which again shows an element of support that the government has been giving to foreigners within China to ensure that any potential discrimination or unease within the country is actually alleviated. Again, our teachers will be able to explain this and talk about this in all likelihood a lot better than I can. What has been witnessed? What have we seen as an organisation working with China to UK, China to global, China to Anglosphere exchange? Well, although some teachers chose to leave after the pandemic began in January, many teachers that Opportunity China has sent to the country have remained. Those who remained have mostly either returned to work or working online and looking at returning to work very soon. Those who remained either continued to work part-time or full-time online throughout the crisis whilst they were there, and those who remained were supported by their Chinese colleagues whether they wanted to leave or remain in the country. So Chinese colleagues that they were working with supported them both in terms of helping them with work, whether that was going online or whether that was going into a safe and socially distanced school environment. But they also helped them in terms of getting them masks, helping them with food deliveries whilst they were in quarantine. There was a huge amount of support that was given, and a really wonderful amount of support that was given by our partner schools and Chinese colleagues to teachers out there. Once again, our teachers will be able to explain a little bit more about this. But this is a side of China that unfortunately isn't hugely seen in the West, how welcoming Chinese are to foreigners, how very supportive the Chinese staff are of their foreign staff whilst they're there, how much they want to ensure their foreign staff have a positive experience, have a positive time, and have a positive interpretation of themselves, their company, and also the kindness that just generally emanates through a lot of Chinese society and warmness and interest in foreigners that exists, which is quite the opposite of what a lot of fear of animosity currently exists that might be there. In the long and short of things, China and the West do have broadly different and historically different social structures and moral priorities that exist. There have been strong political tensions in the past, and these have not restricted person-to-person exchange and cooperation. There has been nothing in the past that has led to a decline, to a stop, or to a reversal of progress that's been made over the last 10 to 20 years of relations between China and the West when it comes to person-to-person exchange in particular. In fact, even throughout these political strains, much of the process of being able to go and work and live in China has improved and gotten easier. Those who aren't involved in politically sensitive, diplomatic or business related or high level business and politics related areas are not affected historically or contemporarily in any way whatsoever by the strains that exist between China and the West, whether that's at the highest end of the spectrum of people fearing things like detention or being deported, or at the low end of the spectrum fearing constant discrimination on the street. This simply hasn't ever happened during these times. I can speak a little bit from experience, having lived through several times of very high political strain. Although some of my Chinese friends might not have liked the government of the UK, they certainly didn't treat me any differently, and strangers didn't treat me any differently. There are 1.4 billion people who live in China who are Chinese citizens, and the vast majority of them are always open, interested, curious, wanting to speak with you, wanting to know about you as an individual. And although China is certainly a collectivized and collectivist society in many ways, they view foreigners very much as individuals on their own right, as opposed to necessarily being representations of their country. At least the vast majority do. Those who don't commit crimes in China, this includes things like taking or smuggling drugs, assault and theft, are not affected historically or contemporarily either by any new rules or laws that are brought in or tightened restrictions on foreigners. Again, there are stories in the news about foreigners who have failed drug tests being deported. Frankly, this is true, but frankly, this is also nothing that you need to worry about if you don't take drugs in China. It's a relatively simple thing to do. It's a relatively simple thing to remember. And it brings me on quite neatly to things to be aware of and things that are important to think about when you're going to China, as well as going to pretty much any other country to live and work in. You absolutely have the right to your opinions and views, and have the right to speak to people about those opinions and views. But do show discretion as to who you're going to be speaking with. Again, there are things that are sensitive in China, but you're not going to be arrested for making private statements or comments or expressions of opinion between yourself and a friend, yourself and a colleague. But what's important is you should really consider who you are speaking with, and more so than a wider sort of political or fear of legal repercussions being made against you, think about what you're saying that might be sensitive. Think about the fact that in China there is a lot of national pride. There is a lot of a sense of suffering and struggle that many Chinese people have come through, and in many ways, as with people in many other countries, to have their country criticised is not always something that will go down particularly well with a lot of people. This is a great opportunity to learn things from another point of view as well. See, this is really the crux of it. It's so important to be open-minded when speaking and listening with people in China, because even if you disagree, living and working and being in and out, day in, day out, in a society so different as China is, really helps you improve your ability to be able to see things from a different side. Even if you don't agree with it, you can at least be empathetic towards a particular point of view. And this is a super key skill that is actually going to be probably the most important thing you're going to take from your times in China, is that ability to be able to see things from a totally different perspective. And you can only do that through being immersed, through living in and making the effort whilst you are in China. And of course, abide by the laws and regulations of China as you would any other country. China is not the UK, China is not the US. China has its own laws, China has its own constitutional structure. They are going to be bringing in lessons for foreigners who are coming over to working to best educate them on what is and isn't acceptable in the country when you come over, which is actually a really good initiative and will help people a lot when they come over there, to ensure they have the clearest idea of exactly what's going to be expected of them as a foreigner living and working in China whilst you're there. But of course, abiding by those laws, regulations, and attempting to abide by cultural norms. Of course, there's no pressure and no expectation from Chinese people that you will be immediately able to assimilate into Chinese culture, but learning about them and going along with them as much as you can, as you would in any other country, is incredibly important again. So just before we finish, I am happy, please do pop down any questions that you might have. Do please email them to info@opportunity-china.com, and we will do our very best to answer anything that you might have, any questions that you might have, any queries or concerns. Do just pop them across to that email and we'll do our very best to answer those for you. You can contact either Stephanie or myself directly as well if you have any private personal questions that you want to ask. But thank you very much indeed for joining us. It has been a little bit of a shorter one than usual, but it was lovely to speak with you all. Please do drop those questions into us if there's anything that we've missed, if there's anything that you feel would be important that we haven't spoken about